Hello, and thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up on today's film show. Fighting for the Stars and Stripes, Soy Nero tackles the issue of green card soldiers in the US. Director Rafi Pitts is here to tell us more. An artist's impression of a rocky friendship. Cézanne and I tells the story of the French painter's days with Emile Zola. And Short is Sweet for the Cartoon d'Or, the prize awarded to the best European animated short film. Rafi Pitts, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm, of course, joined by Nesselson, our film critic, as well. Now, let's start with your film, Soy Nero. It tackles this issue of green card soldiers in the US, and it's dedicated to all the green card soldiers who were deported after serving in the US military. This is not a very well-known phenomenon. I didn't know about this before. Can you explain how it works and also why you wanted to talk about it?
Well, the green card soldier, the reason I wanted to talk about it is mainly because of the situation I found myself in, which was not being able to go back to my own country, being Iran, and the difficulties I had with it. But I didn't want to tell that story. I wanted to tell a story that's a bigger story, if you like, a more important story on a human level. So I was fascinated by walls as I was writing, and I thought of what's the craziest wall I can think of, and that was the wall that separates Mexico with America. And basically, those stories have been told so many times that you start digging in and you're looking for something that might be more interesting, if you like, to start with, and then you come across the green card soldiers. So then I went out to Los Angeles to meet green card soldiers, and they told me about the deported green card soldiers, which I couldn't believe until I went to Tijuana, where there's a camp called the Bunker, where all these young men stay. Now, deported green card soldiers, there's 8,000 deported green card soldiers, there's 100,000 green card soldiers altogether. But the 8,000 deported green card soldiers are basically young men who signed on, sometimes using fake ID, because a lot of these young men are from the working class, and they couldn't prove that they'd been in the United States for 5 years, and thought that by joining the army, once they were in the army, they would be fine, and that their identity would be cleared, if you like, because fighting for a flag wearing a uniform, they're young men, so idealistically, believing in their country, America, because they'd all grown up in America, they just didn't have the necessary papers. So they signed in with false ID, and a lot of them ended up being deported once they were found out.
Okay, so it's like a fast track. Well, let's take a look at a clip which shows the main character, one of these green card soldiers, and he receives some unsolicited advice.
The whole thing's a setup, man. That's reality. It's not G.I. Joe time. It's a fucking setup. You got it?
Sure thing.
You think this is, hey, man, I'm gonna go get a fucking gun, I'm gonna become an American citizen, I'm gonna become G.I. fucking Joe? Well, get ready to have your fucking ass set up, because that's what's going on here. You're getting set up. And I've been set up by some motherfucker who thinks that he can control the shifting of the fucking earth. And let me tell you something, they think they can control it. And they do.
I noticed that the closing credits list something I've never seen before: working visa permits and working visa broker. Where did you shoot, and was it difficult to get permission? And is it complicated shooting in those locations?
Complicated, yes, but with the help of Mexicans, no. Because once the Mexicans were interested by this story, they wanted it to be known. And also, we were shooting in Tijuana for the wall part. And for me, it was a necessity because I wanted it to be told by them. Same with the American side. I wanted American actors to tell the story of the country, not being from that place. I spent a year between Tijuana and Los Angeles before we started shooting, because for me it was important to, not betray their point of view. So whether it be the American point of view or the Mexican point of view, it had to come from them. So I worked a great deal with the actors, and they told me their true story. So I would say that now that I look back, It wasn't so complicated.
And with working with Americans and Mexicans, did they ever have a problem with the fact that you yourself were raised in Iran, a country that we don't always say good things about in America?
No, the wonderful thing about America is that nobody comes from America outside of native Indians. So it is a country of immigrants. And originally, when I thought of telling the story, I wanted to tell a story of a young man who wants to belong to the country of immigrants. You know, because that's what's beautiful in America, is that you have everybody from all over the world represented in that country. So that was the outset of also why I wanted to make the film. And then I came across the Green Card Soldier. But at the end of the day, it is a story about human beings in general.
And this question of migration, it's really at the core of the story, the kind of hardships people are willing to undergo to get to the US, to stay in the US. How do you see that evolving, given the current political climate?
Well, I think the world is being very ignorant towards migrants and looking down on migrants instead of embracing them. You know, if you look at the history of migrants, maybe 40 years ago, the world wouldn't have had the same attitude. I think now politicians use it as an excuse for all the problems that concern a country. And so we find ourselves in a world that's simplifying everything, and by simplifying it, telling us what is good and what is bad. So I think the beauty in humanity is its complexity, and the more you simplify it, the more the world becomes dangerous. You know.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be very difficult to say this in a nutshell, but we have a gentleman named Donald Trump who keeps hammering away at the importance of building a wall, where you say there already is sort of a wall. In your film, we see people playing volleyball over it. How much damage has this gentleman done to the discourse about the makeup of the world?
Well, the horror with Trump is that, I mean, I'm thinking about him constantly with regards to everything that's going on. And I find that the horror with him is the damage that he's already done. And whether he's elected or not, he's already done so much damage that how can we repair it and how can we come back to it? You know, my fear with a man like Trump is, what is the after Trump going to be? With or without him, what is it going to be? And how are people going to look at it? At the same time, I think that maybe he's brought about an awareness that the world needed to have, where we all unite and fight against that kind of ideology.
Well, it's certainly a very interesting political time to be alive right now. We're moving from filmmaking to painting with a new film released in France, a historical drama named Cézanne et Moi. I think we all know who Cézanne is, but who is the moi or I in the title?
Emile Zola, of course. It turns out the great writer and the great painter met as adolescents and enjoyed a very rocky, lifelong friendship, colored literally by the fact that Zola knew incredible success in his lifetime, and Cézanne remained poor and underappreciated. In one of the many borderline clunky lines of dialogue, the very talented Guillaume Gallienne, playing Cézanne, wonders aloud whether any of his paintings will ever hang in an art museum. And his work is so unpopular that he gets refused by the Salon des Refusés. He comes from a comfortably well-off family in the south of France, ends up near penniless in Paris. Zola is played by another of France's most gifted actors, Guillaume Canet, but neither of these Guillaumes can bring this sort of choppy script to life. Even the naked women, painters' models, skinny dipping aren't particularly interesting. That's quite an accomplishment. Writer-director Daniel Thompson, who has been making movies for decades, has made this detail feel pedestrian rather than touching. And Zola, of course, is still familiar to us for J'accuse, which is the basis of a sort of citizen agitator journalism. And we are told that Cézanne painted about 1,000 canvases, 700 of which do hang in art museums.
Well, maybe one that was better off on a canvas than on the big screen. Now, we're going from painting right back to filmmaking, something of an experimental event that's coming up soon in Paris.
French films with English subtitles for foreign audiences in Paris, which is a brilliant idea that I would have killed for when French was still kind of a mysterious language to me. This is 2 weeks. We're giving you some advance notice. It starts September 28th through October 11th. And some of my French or bilingual friends have said, well, that's silly. But keep in mind, there's audio description for the blind who want to go to a movie. There's French subtitles on French films for deaf and hard of hearing people who want to go to the movies. And people who are in France but don't master the French language are sort of a disadvantaged group. So if this experiment works, anyone who comes to visit France will know that there will be a place where they can go and see current French releases with English subtitles, and I think that's got promise.
Rafi, you're someone who's made films internationally. You've participated in international projects, made films in Iran, the US, here in France. Do you feel that you're limited by nationalities or the countries that you're making these films in?
I never think of films as nationalities. For me, art in general doesn't have a border. Art is an expression. We might have a language or a culture, but at the end of the day, if we're sincere in our expression, it crosses borders and we understand them. But of course, if there are subtitles to help, that's even better.
All the better.
You know.
Now, we're staying in France with a lesser-known accolade being handed out in Toulouse a few days ago. What is the Cartoon d'Or, Lisa?
This is a rather rare trophy, which is awarded to the best European animated short film of the year as part of a very interesting trade show to promote European animation called Cartoon Forum. They hosted 80 new projects from 22 countries, and over 900 film and broadcast professionals came to that. This year's winner of the Cartoon d'Or is called Yule and the Snake. It's a French production by Gabriel Harel. The other finalists from Spain, Denmark, and France were all sort of downbeat in their subject matter this year, but the animation styles themselves are incredibly exciting because France and the rest of Europe are going out of their way to train animators. And I can't help noticing the subject tags for this film, if you look it up online, are crisis, surreal, and youth/teenagers, if those are your interests.
Certainly quirky. Okay, thank you very much for that, Lisa. And thank you, Rafi Pitts, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And talking about Soy Nero, which is out on French screens soon. So we'll leave you with a clip of Yule and the Snake. Remember to check out our website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.